Hello, everybody, and welcome in to the Flagship Podcast recap of Texas's error-prone 35-13 SEC opening victory over Mississippi State. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined as always by my esteemed colleague, the one and only Eric Henry, proud Tampa Catholic graduate, by the way. Of Horns247.com. And Eric, tonight, Steve Sarkisian, Texas's SEC opening win over Mississippi State as herky jerky. And I think that is probably a little bit of an understatement. Here's how this game went for three quarters. It seemed like the list of lowlights was longer than the highlights. 2 Jaden Blue lost fumbles, 8 offensive penalties, including a holding call that wiped out an amazing 20-yard touchdown run by Quintravian Wisner, who replaced Blue after the 2 fumbles. A drop by Jonte Cook that would have gone for a 62-yard touchdown, a partially blocked punt that led to a Mississippi State field goal, struggles by the Texas defense to stop the run in the first half, and a couple of MSU receivers who got behind the Texas secondary and mercifully for Texas dropped passes, although they did finally hit a 46-yard deep ball to set up their only touchdown of the game. And Steve Sarkisian took points off the board. A 49-yard doink field goal that Bert Auburn doinked off the right, upright, and through. But after an offside penalty on Mississippi State, Texas went for it on 4th and 3. In the third quarter and failed. But Arch Manning to the rescue, Eric. He was fantastic. It seemed like whenever they needed a play, he made it. And I thought he got in for a 26-yard touchdown run, but he throws, completes 84% of his passes, throws for 2 touchdowns, no picks, and ran around. Impressive performance from Arch Manning. And it got better for the Texas run defense in the second half.
Yeah, Chip, where do I start? I think Steve Sarkisian's assessment was probably correct, sounding like an old quarterback / baseball player, right? Herky jerky, certainly a phrase you would hear someone of that cut from that cloth use. Let me go ahead and start with the positive, and then I'll kind of come to the negative. I just wrote about this in my post-game story, the fact that this Texas offense, Chip, went for over 500 yards for the third time this year in a game that, as you mentioned, probably had, and I don't have the exact total, but north of 100, maybe 150 close of offensive yards wiped off because of penalties. They could have been much higher in terms of total yardage than they ended the evening with. What really stuck out to me was Steve Sarkisian talked about it this Monday, the fact that he felt he was kicking himself for not building in easy completions for Arch Manning. Well, you said 84% of your passes completed. You don't get that unless you're getting some natural easy completions, getting the ball out of your hands quickly into the hands of your playmakers. Isaiah Bond, DeAndre Moore, the list goes on. Arch Manning spoke about it post-game, said that, yeah, sometimes it's just as simple as getting the ball out of your hands, letting those guys do what they do. Chip, what really stood out to me was Steve Sarkisian's postgame. I asked him if, the run pass balance, Chip, and it's in my story. When you look at opening drives for this team, 30 passes compared to 7 runs. If that's by design. And Steve said, yeah, he felt that in earlier years with Texas, whether it was with Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson or last year with Jonathan Brooks, you just had to run because that's where the strength of the offense was. So this year, and he analogized this going back to being a California guy, those old Bill Walsh offenses, right? That West Coast offense where you pass to kind of set up the run. That was by design. He felt that this year they're a little more balanced. He used the term balance and that they're able to pass, to kind of help set up the run. It's very noticeable how that was the case today. The run game, again, they tossed, Arch Manning tossed for over 300 yards. They almost hit 200 yards on the ground. Now, it wasn't a great necessarily rushing game. I turned and said to you, that they had 5 carries for -1 yards with 25 minutes left. 25 minutes into the game. So clearly the rushing attack took off in the second half and they got some chunk plays. And you noted Jaden Blue. I turned and said to you also in the press box, Jaden, you don't want to see he has a fumbling problem, but when you look at the numbers, it's not good. 155 touches, his 155th career touch was the last one of the game for Jaden Blue. It was a fumble, turned it over. Of those 155 touches, 5 fumbles. That's 30, a fumble every 31 and change touches. For a point of reference, you see pro backs, and Jaden Blue is someone who believes he is a pro and wants to be a pro, go 200, 250, 300 touches without a fumble, right? So just for a point of reference on where that is. So want to clean that up, and that kind of transitions me into the bad, as you talked about, the penalty yardage. Got to get that cleaned up. Some of the holds, false starts, things of that nature. This was a Mississippi State team, Chip, that, quite frankly, offensively, yes, while they've done some things, wasn't like they were a juggernaut rushing team. So to come in here, and I don't have the finals on me, but to run efficiently the way they did. And David Benda noted in his post game that they got to get that cleaned up. That's something that, will spin it forward to OU, I'm sure, before this post game instant reaction is done. But they likely are going to feature a quarterback that's a dual threat. We know what a dual threat did to this team last year. So you want to clean that up. Still, again, I think, Chip, it's never to say it's a good thing you have this kind of outing, but at least it leaves Steve Sarkisian and his coaching staff with, hey, guys, we're not invincible. Yes, we're the number 1 team in the nation, but we got a long way to go to be, really the team that we think we can be. So some good, some bad, but all in all, again, you can't ever be mad at a 35-13 victory.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Full disclosure, we are recording right now as Alabama and Georgia are in the third quarter, with Alabama leading 30-7 in Tuscaloosa. If Alabama holds on and wins in that decisive of fashion, could Alabama rise to number 1 ahead of Texas? We'll see. Was the performance for Texas that sluggish? Because they did end up winning by 22 points by 3 touchdowns, and Texas has won 11 straight regular season games. For the first time since 08-09, how about this? For only the third time in the last 55 years, Texas has started 5-0 in back-to-back seasons. Also, 08-09 was the last time that happened. So despite the clunker feel of this game for 2 quarters, certainly for the defense, and 3 quarters for the offense, Arch Manning scored on the last play of the third quarter. Otherwise, that third quarter was a utter disaster. It started with the Blues' second fumble. Then it was the penalty brigade, and Sark takes points off the board to go for it on 4th and 3 and fails. And then finally, Arch Manning scores. Looked like it should have been the 26-yard run that he tightrope down the sideline for the touchdown. But these refs had some interesting thoughts on things tonight. We've been warned about SEC officials. I guess this is our first taste of it, Eric. The defense, though, did come to life in that second half, limited Mississippi State to 1.4 yards per carry in the second half. And it was playing behind the line of scrimmage. 11 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, 2 more sacks for 5-star freshman Colin Simmons, who now has a team-leading 4 sacks. Colton Vasek gets a sack. It was Anthony Hill with 2 tackles for loss, including a big sack. Eric, your thoughts on the defense kind of getting things going there in the second half after staying on the field way too long in the first half?
Yeah, Chip, you talk about the defense thing on the field too long. Well, I don't have the final drive chart on me, but you know what really stood out to me? Mississippi State, from their opening drive, even though it didn't net them 7 points, went 7 minutes. And yes, some of that was, some third down conversions and things of that nature. Mississippi State came out with a game plan, just, probably couldn't have expected that much running, right? But Texas, when you compare the drive charts, Texas had some short drives. When you talk about the fumbles and the turnover on downs in the first half, that's going to put your defense on the field in some situations that are tough, right? So I do want to state that up front. With that being said, yes, while you would have liked to have seen them perform a little bit better against the run, definitely saw some runs that went through the teeth of this Texas defense, an area that I think, while maybe not necessarily the strength of this year's defense, had been performing well with Vern Broughton. Vern had a good game, that strip sack, fumble, Alfred Collins, Anthony Hill, etc. Didn't necessarily expect that. To talk about what you said, getting pressure on the quarterback, Colin Simmons, Barron Sorrell got in some of the action, right? Anthony Hill was credited with a sack that, in all likelihood, probably should have went to Barron, right? At least they should have split that half and half, right? So there's that as well. So this fact that this pass rush, Chip, is doing what it is doing, that is encouraging. And also you get a turnover, right? Maybe it doesn't come in the form of interception, but you get those fumbles, right? That to me also is very encouraging because it's the accumulation. It's all those things that make a great defense, right? Pass defense, run defense, forcing turnovers, getting off the field. So that was encouraging as well. And also the secondary, again, it's kind of hard to assess secondary play in a game like this when you're not necessarily being tested per se by the pass. This was also a game that I think they'll have some things to clean up because we finally saw some missed tackles, something that we'd gotten so used to not seeing after last year and all the missed tackles. So a bit of a mixed bag. However, Chip, in my mind, the splash plays, the sacks, the stops behind the line of scrimmage really stood out in all. Again, you don't want to say a solid win, but anytime you can get an SEC win by 22 points, and as to your point, we'll see kind of where that leaves Texas in the AP polls. You can't be mad at it.
Yeah, DeAndre Moore, who barely practiced this week, and Sarkisian said, hey, you need to practice on Thursday if you want to play in the game. He did. He was still kind of gimpy. Sarkisian thought he wouldn't play, but then he shows up for the walkthrough on Friday, looks pretty good, ends up with 4 catches, 103 yards, 2 touchdowns. And the last of the touchdowns was a perfectly floated touchdown pass from the 27 from Arch Manning to DeAndre Moore for 28-6 lead. And then Manning rounded out the scoring by connecting with Isaiah Bond on a backward screen that Bond turned into a 26-yard touchdown run, putting Texas up 35-13. So Texas got explosive in the second half. I think Arch Manning's going to be real happy with his deep ball percentage again because he connected on some more deep balls. And, it was an impressive performance from the receivers as well. So, some quick helmet stickers before we wrap up. Definitely Arch Manning, Vernon Broughton. You mentioned the strip sack. Colin Simmons, my goodness, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Anthony Hill and David Benda both had big tackles for loss. The DeAndre Moore touchdowns. I thought Quintravian Wisner was really good. I mean, he missed last week with the hamstring. Jaden Blues got fumbleitis, so Wisner comes in and delivers big time. And then Colton Vasek, Eric, I mean, limited snaps, but back-to-back games with sacks for Vasek. We won't get into what the snaps are at the defensive end position. I'm still confused, but I thought the defense really came to life in that second half. And Steve Sarkisian said, hey, it's good. We got 2 weeks for Oklahoma. We got some things to clean up. We'll be able to get their attention. Your thoughts now as Texas heads into the off week with Oklahoma on the horizon. Oklahoma, a winner at Auburn today with a pick 6, kind of proving to be the turning point in the game for that Oklahoma defense.
Yeah, Chip, you talk about helmet stickers. I'll keep it kind of brief in terms of what I'm looking at into the bye week. It gives this team an opportunity to get healthy. Quinn Ewers most notably, but some of the other guys, he took a look at that SEC availability / injury report. Some other guys on that list as well. So you want to see those guys get healthy. Derek Williams, you want to see him get back. That's probably another notable as well. Also just the team. At this time in the year, you've played 5 games. Guys are starting to get those nicks and bruises and whatnot. So you want to get them healthy. But as I alluded to, now you have something to take to your team and say, all right, we did what we were supposed to do in the non-conference. Now we've played our first SEC game. And Chip, you'll probably hear me use this quote 10 times before the season is over. Kirby Smart said you can be humbled any week in the SEC. You're a week away from humility, right? It's not to say that Mississippi State, Chip, this game was never in any real danger. You always felt like Texas more or less was going to pull away with it, even when it was close. But there are teams. How about a team out of Lexington, Kentucky, Chip, that will come here in 5-6 weeks or so, if my math is correct? You play around that type of game with them, maybe this outcome isn't the same. So you'll have an opportunity to kind of reinforce some teaching tools, some teaching points, and now this team has a feel for what it's going to take in the SEC. Yeah.
All right. As we wrap it up here on our flagship podcast recap of Texas's 35-13 error-prone SEC opening victory over Mississippi State, Alabama continues to lead Georgia 30-7 with a little under 6 minutes left in the third quarter. And as we mentioned, Oklahoma beats Auburn 27-21 after trailing 21-10. Oklahoma worked its way back, and Kip Lewis with a 63-yard interception return that gave Oklahoma its first lead with 4 minutes left in the game, and they closed it out 27-21. We will have a ton more on. We'll start previewing the Red River Shootout. We can't get enough. So Eric and I will be back early in the week to start looking ahead to Oklahoma. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into this flagship podcast recap of Texas's SEC opening win over Mississippi State. For Eric Henry, I am Chip Brown. Until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Please like and subscribe to Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. Stay safe and keep the faith.